Hello Ignition Radio listeners and welcome to Airtime of the Geek. It's Monday and it's 1pm GMT if you're listening live via our website or via TuneIn. If you're listening to the 1am repeat, it's 5pm Pacific, 7pm Central and 8pm Eastern. If you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to this video and our channel. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter at Airtime Geek or Instagram at Airtime of the Geek. You can email me, paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk, or you can call the studio. The number's 01642 645 827. You can also take a look at geeky art I upload to DeviantArt. You can look me up on there and my name is Airtime Geek. It's the 4th of April, which means it's only 20 days until Game of Thrones Season 6 airs. 20 days. Less than 3 weeks. Are you excited? I'm excited. I'm going to be doing episode recaps as the season goes on, which will probably involve me staying up very late on night, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice for you, dear listeners. Let's do the geek news. Gary Shandling, known to Marvel Cinematic Universe fans as Senator Stern, who is a pain to Iron Man in Iron Man 2, of course, and he's a secret Hydra member, which is revealed in Captain America Winter Soldier. Spoilers for a film that's a few years old now. Sadly passed away at the age of 66, and I'm sure that the whole world is going to miss him because he was a very, very funny comedian. The Supergirl Flash crossover went down a storm with fans, as predicted. Kara and Barry were completely adorable together. But in other Supes news, Batman v Superman, aka Dawn of Justice, tanked. Due to its, quote, grim and completely joyless nature. That was a quote from a review of a person who said that he liked the movie. DC have decided to go back on its very, very strict no jokes, no humour rules, and have ordered reshoots for Suicide Squad in order to add more humour. Civil War is getting closer. Have you booked your tickets? I've booked my tickets. Have you picked your team? As you know, here on Airtime of Geek, I am not Team Cap. I am not Team Iron Man. I am Team Sexy Times. Apparently, some people were panicking over the idea of Tom Hiddleston bowing out as Loki. Apparently he's quoted as being saying that Thor Ragnarok would be his final time out of the gate. But since he's contracted for 6 films, I think it's fairly likely that the world's favourite trickster will turn up in both parts of Infinity War, though whose side he'll be on will yet to be revealed. Though if the Captain America Tony Stark 6 times thing doesn't happen, I'd be open to some Loki Tony Stark 6 times happening. Or if Hulk wanders back from his vision quest, some Science Bros sexy times happening. Basically I ship Tony with everyone. Bad news, apparently the Tick reboot will be darker and more grounded, despite starring comedic genius Peter Serafinowicz. I really hope they change their minds on this, because if there's something I cannot stand, it's things that are being more dark and grounded and gritty when they used to be light and fun, and that was why they were good. Okay, spoiler time. Someone was killed on The Walking Dead last night. So if you're a fan and you haven't seen the season finale yet, please block your ears and go la 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 for the next 2 minutes. So a major character was killed, leaving fans shocked, upset, angry, excited and screaming for the next season to be here already. Twitter was ablaze with screams of WTF ACM or WTF AMC, if you read out the initialism in the right order. Okay, so spoilers. They didn't actually reveal who gets the head bashed in by Negan's beloved Lucille, and the fans are furious. This isn't a good cliffhanger. This is the kind of cliffhanger that annoys the fudge out of people. Fans are going to have to wait 6 months to find out who was going to die, and that's a long time for things like contract renewals to get leaked online on the internet. So it's probably going to get spoiled before the show gets picked up again in October. And between then and now, there's a lot of other TV shows to get excited about, including Game of Thrones. So, sorry, Walking Dead fans, I think you got the short end of the stick on your season finale this year. I mean, like, the reason people talked about Jon Snow for the entire year between Game of Thrones seasons is because it's Game of Thrones. This Walking Dead isn't Game of Thrones. You've got to get this into your head, AMC. Though, however, after reading much fan speculation and with knowledge of the comic books, I think we can safely narrow it down to 3 characters. Either Abraham, Glenn, or Daryl has been killed. Abraham's already dead at this point in the comics. This is the point in the comics where Glenn dies, and Daryl isn't even in the comics. Though with so much talk about how much a beloved character it's supposed to be going to die, and how much hate mail they'd be getting, etc., etc., I think we can say it's going to be either Daryl or Glenn. And since Daryl is everyone's favourite, I think we can say it's Glenn. Also, you can really hear Maggie screaming at the end of the scene, and someone slowed it down on Tumblr, and you can kind of really hear her screaming, Glenn. It's there. It's on the internet. From what I've been reading, 2 reactions to Negan's introduction, people are loving Jeffrey Dean Morgan for, like, they're saying he's the best part of the finale, and he was brilliant and handsome and charming, and more handsome and charming than Rick, and maybe the show could be about him next season. Who knows? Right, so we're going to go to a song, and then I think it's time for this week's Top 10. So, it's time for this week's Top 10, and I'll just remind listeners that comments, queries and suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter at Airtime Geek, you can follow me on Instagram at Airtime of the Geek, and you can email me, paulab at ignitionradio.co.uk, or you can call the studio 01642 645 827. I remind you of this because last week's list, I got a fair amount of guff from some of my friends over the uninclusion of Firefly on my top 10 sci-fi shows set in space. The reason I didn't include Firefly is because I don't like Firefly, and it's my list. So stop giving me guff about it, because it really hacked me off. All right, this week's top 10, we are counting down my top 10 truly entertaining bad movies. And in this, I need to have a special word on writer-director Stephen Sommers. Sommers is the special kind of director. I don't think there's a legitimately, like, a movie that he's made that I've seen and not instantly fell in love with. Stephen Sommers doesn't let little things like historical accuracy or the laws of physics get in the way of making a great movie. His oeuvre, which includes Deep Rising, The Mummy, The Scorpion King, Van Helsing and G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, includes what are some of my favourite bad action movies of all time. Movies which I seriously love. So, sir, I dedicate this list to you and salute you. Just because a movie is bad doesn't mean it's not entertaining, particularly if you happen to be a Riff Tracks fan as well, as I spoke of last week. These are movies that, I love. Like, these are not movies that I hate. I really enjoy these movies. They're terrible, but I really enjoy them. And in fact, like, the top 3 I watch on a regular basis. But of course, I like to do these in reverse order because it's more fun for me. So, starting at number 10, Roadhouse. Roadhouse is a movie which is acted so badly that even though they cast a legitimately blind person in the movie, I didn't believe his performance as a blind man. Though it is the best movie ever made about a world-famous bouncer, I really have to reiterate that. James Dalton, who's played by Patrick Swayze, is a professional cooler, i.e. a specialised doorman or bouncer with a mysterious past, who is enticed from his current job in a club in New York by Frank Tillman, who's Kevin Teague, to take over his club security. And his club's called the Double Juice. It's in Jasper, Missouri. He plans to invest substantial money into the club to enhance its image, and first it needs a cooler to maintain security. Roadhouse is rated a camp classic, not because of its quality, but because it is one of the most implausible films of all time. Much of this is traced to Swayze's character, a modern-day samurai with a degree in philosophy who practices Tai Chi, dresses like a Jedi, and works as a bouncer. Roadhouse was the first movie to receive the RiffTrax treatment. Mike Nelson said this about the film. People have asked me if I hold a unifying theory that informs my writing on cinema. In the past, I've told them that I simply judge a movie on its success or failure in representing the perceived point of view of the filmmaker. But now I realise I was just saying something to get rid of them. What I really believe is that a film should be judged on how well it comes off when compared with the Patrick Swayze film Roadhouse. For Roadhouse is the single finest American film. And remember,
pain don't hurt.
So please enjoy the Jeff Healey Band, Roadhouse Blues. So that was the Jeff Healey Band and Roadhouse Blues from the movie Roadhouse. Number 9 on my list of the top 10 truly entertaining bad movies is Anaconda. Anaconda is a 1997 adventure horror film directed by Luis Loza. It centres on a documentary crew who have been taken hostage by a snake hunter who is going after a legendary giant anaconda, which is discovered in the Amazon rainforest. Despite receiving mostly negative reviews from critics, the film was a box office hit and was followed by a series of sequels and a crossover film with the Lake Placid franchise. By the way, the Lake Placid films aren't on this list because they're legitimately awesome, except for the second one, but that's just legitimately bad. The acting in Anaconda isn't as inconsistent as the size of the giant snake. With an all-star cast of Ice Cube, Jennifer Lopez,
I am Jennifer Lopez,
Jon Voight, Eric Stoltz, Owen Wilson, and a very small early role for Danny Trejo, though Jennifer Lopez plays the main character. Jon Voight's clearly the star. He plays the part of Paul Cerrone. He's a former priest from Paraguay who decided to become a snake poacher in the Amazon, catching them for rich clients. Apparently this is a really lucrative business. He arranged with his old hunting partner Mateo to lure a documentary film crew to a giant man-eating anaconda's home territory to use them as bait for the hunt. He incapacitates the team leader with a poisonous wasp before saving his life to win the crew's trust and offers them a shortcut that leads right into the snake's territory. The passengers are picked off one by one by the anaconda, which crushes its prey in its coils before slowly digesting them alive. Cerrone manipulates one of them into becoming his partner, but he sacrifices the guy without a second thought when he prevents the others from shooting the snake when it grabs his ally, because he can't make a profit off a dead animal. He strangles a woman to death with his thighs when she comes to get revenge for a dead boyfriend, and he is ultimately overthrown but escapes and captures 2 of the remaining people inside the anaconda's feeding ground. He douses them with monkey blood and tries to feed them to the snake so he can trap it while mocking their impending deaths. It's as bad as it sounds, but also quite fantastic, and having seen the sequels to the movie, apart from the Lake Placid crossover, which I've yet to see, it's actually quite new. What I can say is the sequels get even better as they go on. I mean, like, Hunt for the Blood Orchid was fantastic. It put, like, a reason as to why that the snake is an absolutely giganormous snake. Which is a legitimate word, by the way, that is used to describe the snake in Anaconda, giganormous. And then there's one with David Hasselhoff, so I don't know what really more you can want from a movie. Giant snakes, which then develop scorpion stinger tails, and David Hasselhoff. I mean, you'd be a fool not to watch it, that's what I'm saying. Continuing on my list, it's number 6, Street Fighter. Street Fighter is a 1994 American action film written and directed by Stephen E. D'Souza. It was based loosely on the video game Street Fighter 2, produced by Capcom, and stars Jean-Claude Van Damme, Raul Julia, along with supporting performances by Byron Mann, Damien Chapa, Kylie Minogue, Wes Studi, and, of course, the incomparable Ming-Na Wen. The film altered the plot of the original game and motives of the Street Fighter characters. It also significantly lightened the tone of the adaptation, inserting several comical interludes. For instance, one particular fight scene between E. Honda and Zangief pays homage to old Godzilla films. The film was actually a commercial success, which is surprising considering it's a terrible movie, making approximately 3 times its production costs, but it was completely panned by critics, quite rightly. However, Raul Julia's performance as General M. Bison was widely praised and garnered him a nomination for Best Supporting Actor at the Saturn Awards. Julia at the time was suffering from stomach cancer, as evidenced by his pale and gaunt facial complexion throughout the movie, took the role only at the request of his 2 children. This was his final performance, and it was his final posthumous theatrical performance. He died 2 months before the film's release, and the film is dedicated to his memory. The storyline goes that in the remote southeastern Asian country of Shadaloo, the power-mad dictator, General M. Bison, of course, Raul Julia, is trying to usurp power and take over first the country, then the world. Of course! To fund his megalomaniac schemes, he's captured several dozen relief workers who are totally not from the Red Cross and is holding them for hostage for the sum of $20 billion. And it's up to the Allied Forces nation, totally not the UN, led by Colonel F. William Guile, who's Jean-Claude Van Damme, to get in there, take Bison out and rescue the hostages, and they have 3 days to do so before the hostages start dying. Street Fighter is responsible for the trope, but for me it was Tuesday, and I'm just going to play the little audio clip.
For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
And the reason that that's now the trope name of that particular trope, but for me it was Tuesday, is because it's such a brilliant analogy. For every villain, it was Tuesday, and for every hero, it was the most important day of their life, at least when revenge is involved. And it's a perfect analogy, which is why it holds up, despite the movie being comically terrible, but also really, really, really fun. Like I said, Ming-Na Wen, who I adore, is fantastic in it. Everyone gives, they seem to be giving it their all, even though the fact that it's pretty bad. So I'm going to play you a song from the movie, and this is actually the only song I could find from the movie, because it's 90% hip-hop, which isn't in itself a bad thing, but literally every other song either contains several instances of the N-word, and lots and lots of swears, which obviously we can't play. This is a family show. Well, it's a daytime show, so... And I don't want to play swears and N-words. It's just not me, so please enjoy the one family-friendly song in the Street Fighter soundtrack. You know, as that song finished, I realised that, God, I should have included Mortal Kombat somewhere, because I love that soundtrack. I think I might have accidentally said that Street Fighter was number 6 instead of number 8, by the way, so oops. Number 7 is Jack Frost. Now, if you're listening via YouTube and looking at the graphic to go along with this, and what you are looking at is a snowman that looks maybe a little bit like Michael Keaton, a little bit like George Clooney, very friendly. It means that the guys who put the videos together for Airtime of the Geek have put the wrong image on there, because it should be a picture of a very angry looking snowman with black eyes and pointy teeth. And if they've just changed the graphic over and left the old one there for comedic purposes, well, that's down to them. See, it's not the Michael Keaton film, it's the other Jack Frost movie. The one which came first. The better one. The movie takes place in the fictional town of Snowmonton, where on the week before Christmas, a truck carrying serial killer Jack Frost to his execution crashes into a genetics truck. The genetic material causes Jack's body to mutate and fuse together with the snow on the ground. Jack is presumed dead and his body melts away. However, he comes back as a killer snowman and takes revenge on the man who finally caught him. Eventually, he is defeated with the use of antifreeze and hairdryers. This movie knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't pretend to be anything it isn't. There are other movies in a similar vein, such as The Ginger Dead Man, starring Gary Busey, but they're just not as fun and entertaining as Jack Frost. There was a sequel made, Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman. It was only made like 3 years later. This time it was set on a tropical island, and it was just as hilarious. I highly recommend, if you can track down a copy by legal or other means, which might be the only possibility because they've been deleted from the catalogue. They're really fun. The tagline for the movie, he's chillin', he's killin', gets me every time. So, because there wasn't a proper soundtrack for Jack Frost, what I'm going to play is a song it's in the movie. I think you'll recognise it. So, number 6 is Masters of the Universe. When I was a kid, I loved the He-Man cartoons. When Masters of the Universe came out, I was so disappointed that it was based more upon the toy line than the cartoon, which was so beloved. Of course, I loved She-Ra as much as He-Man. The film was a huge dissatisfaction to me in childhood. The New Adventures of He-Man came along, and the movie went well forgotten about until I was a little older, and then I sort of viewed it with new eyes, and I discovered that, well, Dolph Lundgren is a very attractive man. He's a big hunk of Swedish beefcake. It's a terrible movie. The acting is bad. It's set mainly on Earth instead of Eternia, but somehow I'm always utterly entertained each time I watched it. A friend of mine basically had bought it on DVD. She put it on. I was like, oh, God, not He-Man. Masters of the Universe, because everyone calls it He-Man. It's Masters of the Universe. It's so bad, but I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. We put it on, and I sat and I watched the film, and slowly it started to dawn on me that actually this was a masterpiece of bad cinema. Skeletor, absolute, just every second he's on screen. It's fantastic. I mean, it helps that, the guy who plays it, I've seen many other films, Ninth Gate. He's a fantastic actor, really great villain, great at chewing the scenery, has a nice little jump. So there's actually a fairly decent music selection from Masters of the Universe, because obviously it's set on Earth instead of in Eternia. So there's a lot of what was modern day music. So we're going to play Living in a Box. We're continuing down my top 10 truly entertaining bad movies. If you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to this video and the channel. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter at Airtime Geek or Instagram at Airtime of the Geek. You can email me, paulaby@ignitionradio.co.uk, or you can call the studio. The numbers 01642 645 827. You can also take a look at the geeky art I upload to DeviantArt. You can look me up on there. My name is Airtime Geek. So, number 5, it might have gotten a little spoiled if you heard that hiccup from earlier, but it's Judge Dredd.
I am the law! I am the law! You betray the law! Law!
Of course, the Sylvester Stallone version of Judge Dredd. If there's just one legacy left from Judge Dredd, it's that of Sly Stallone getting extremely exuberant about the law. Judge Dredd is a terribly entertaining movie, and I mean that in both it is terrible and it is entertaining. It's not the kind of movie you watch because you want to see an awesome action movie. You watch it to be entertained by how utterly ridiculous it is. I know a lot of people weren't keen on the recent remake, but I actually enjoyed it as far as it was a fairly kick-ass action movie. I didn't particularly expect massive levels of sophistication from my action movies, just a decent plot, fair entertainment, and the fact that Lena Headey was massively entertaining as Marmot in it helped as well. But yes, the old Sly Stallone version, 13 years after the release of Judge Dredd, Sylvester Stallone discussed his feelings about the movie in an issue of Uncut magazine. In 2008, he is quoted as saying, "I loved that property when I read it because it took a genre that I love, what you could term the action morality film, and make it more sophisticated. It had political overtones, and it showed how if we don't curb the way we run our judicial system, the police may end up running our lives. It dealt with archaic governments, it dealt with cloning and all kinds of things that could happen in the future. It was also bigger than any film I've done in its physical stature in the way it was designed. All the people were dwarfed by the system and the architecture, and it shows how insignificant human beings could be in the future. There's a lot of action in the movie and some great acting too. It just wasn't balls to the wall. But I do look back on Judge Dredd as a real missed opportunity, because it seems that a lot of fans had a problem with Judge Dredd removing his helmet. He never does in the comics. But for me, it's more about wasting such great potential that there was in the idea. Just think of all the opportunities that they were doing interesting stuff with the Cursed Earth scenes. It didn't live up to what it could have been. It probably should have been more comic and really humorous and fun. What I learned of that experience was we shouldn't try to have made it Hamlet. It's more Hamlet and eggs."
I am the law! I am the law! You betray the law! Law!
Number 4 is Cool as Ice. When a girl has a heart of stone, there is only one way to melt it. Just add ice. That is the moronic tagline of the movie Cool as Ice.
Cool as ice. Cool as ice.
I've spoken before about riff tracks and MST3K, and this is a movie which is so incompetently hilarious on its own. It does not need riffing. Made as a star vehicle for Vanilla Ice, it is a movie. It's a very funny movie. Well, the parts that weren't meant to be funny, very funny. Cool as Ice was released in 1991 as a vehicle for Vanilla Ice, intending to launch a film career for him. Instead, it almost killed his entire career. The film was poorly received, and Vanilla Ice wouldn't release another album until 1994, which was poorly received. And he wouldn't regain any respect from the industry until his 2001 album. Yes, he had a 2001 album. Though he did retain a loyal fan base. It was small, but it was enough to keep him working until present day, where he's enjoyed something more of a nostalgia revival. The acting in the movie is terrible from just about everyone except Bert from Tremors, and it's so 90s, it's painful. The costumes, the music, the montages. This is a movie that's 90 minutes long, and there's 25 minutes of music montages. The plot's actually okay, but since it's mostly lifted from the movie Easy Rider, that would be why. Though I have no idea what the random scene that was in Fast Forward was all about. Yeah, there's a 5-minute sequence that's done entirely in Fast Forward. I have no idea why. Kids, Fast Forward is what we used to have when we had videotapes before DVDs invented screen skip. Cool as Ice is not a good movie, but it's a highly entertaining one. Number 3 on my list of the top 10 truly entertaining terrible movies is Hollow Man. Hollow Man is a movie directed by one of my favourite directors of all time, Paul Verhoeven. He's made some fantastic movies. Hollow Man tells the tale of an invisible man who goes on a killing spree, as you do. Also, because it's Paul Verhoeven, things get a little bit pervy and a little bit rapey at some point, but if you're familiar with his oeuvre, that's kind of how he rolls. It's also another movie where Kevin Bacon, you get to see his dingle-dangle. Chalk it up to another one on the board, guys. I mean, there's there's a fair few movies where that happens. Bacon's character, Sebastian Cain, doesn't take all that long to get murderous. Early in the film, they established that the longer animals they experiment on stay invisible, the more insane they grow, but the movie hints that Cain wasn't all that stable to begin with. Though Verhoeven expressed some regret for the movie in later years, I think it's an immensely fun and entertaining film. And it made enough money so that it could actually spawn a sequel, which starred Christian Slater. And as much as I love Christian Slater because he's in some utterly brilliant films like Heathers, Pump Up the Volume, True Romance, these days his present isn't really a sign of quality, and I'm not sure why. I think the last of his movies that I saw that was absolutely fantastic was Churchill, The Hollywood Years, which I think a lot of people avoided because they didn't realise that it was a parody. And neither did I, and I'm sorry, the horrendous street cleaner's back again, so I'm just going to cut to the song. So that was the song from Hollow Man. I had a lot of trouble ordering films 1 and 2 because I really loved them both, and what it ended up coming down to was the age of the movies. It's quite simply, as what I chose for number 1 was basically the first really bad movie that I fell in love with. So number 2, I think you will recognise it if I play this little musical phrase. So, of course, if you recognise that little ditty there, which I'm sure a couple of people may have done. All right, my best friend's listening. Maybe he recognised it. Number 2 is basically The Room. You may not have heard of The Room, unlike other movies on this list where you may have heard of the movie, or if not, some of its stars. I doubt, however, you're already familiar with The Room unless someone's actually showed you it. And I'm sure that if you've not heard of The Room, then you've not heard of anyone in it. Trust me, you've not heard of anyone in it. The Room was written by a man called Tommy Wiseau, a man originally from Eastern Bloc of Europe who then moved to France and then to New Orleans, so English is his third language. The movie was directed by a man called Tommy Wiseau, who funded the film himself. Its $6 million budget came largely from, he stated, importing and selling leather jackets. The Room's producers were Chloe Letsky, a woman who was wheelchair-bound and never went anywhere near the set, Drew Caffrey, a man who had been dead for 5 years when the movie went into production, and a man called Tommy Wiseau. Together, they carefully chose lead actor Tommy Wiseau to play the part of Johnny, a banker living in San Francisco with his future wife Lisa, who begins a nefarious affair with Johnny's best friend Mark. The Room is like the movie made by that weird friend of yours who always talks about what he'd do if he made a movie, only this time the guy had a huge budget and released it in a cinema instead of on YouTube, and then made everyone he know watch it instead of just, well, actually, no, that's the same thing that the guy you know does as well. Tommy's best friend and co-star Greg Sestero wrote a book about the production of the movie, and it's called The Disaster Artist, which itself is being made into a movie. It's currently in the post-production stages. Some of the stories from the book reveal how bizarrely complicated this low-budget movie was to make. For example, it went through 3 crews. The first crew quit. The second crew rage quit. The third crew was made up of leftover film students who wanted a credit for IMDb. I would play you some sound bites from this movie, but honestly, Tommy has a bit of a reputation for getting very defensive about copyright, so I'm going to do a couple of quotes in my very best Tommy Wiseau impersonation. They betrayed me. They didn't keep their promise. They tricked me, and I don't care anymore. It took 3 hours and 32 takes for Tommy Wiseau to film a scene which he wrote, in which his line was, "Is not true, is bull. I did not hit her. I did not." Oh, hi, Mark. 3 hours. That took to film. Mark, of course, is Johnny's best friend, played by real-life best buds Tommy and Greg. In his book, Greg Sestero reveals how Johnny named his characters. After watching the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley and feeling how very much his friend Tommy was like the character of Ripley in his delusions, he took him to see it. Afterwards, visibly affected by the movie, Tommy decided he was going to make his own movie, telling his friend, "You will be called Mark, like this guy, Mark Damon." Tony hired a cameraman named Marcus to film the movie's production under the pretense of a making-of documentary of The Room. In reality, Tommy spent every night watching raw footage to see what the crew was saying about him. I really do love The Room. I've got a great deal of affection of it. I watch it over and over and over again. I rewatched it last night just to remind myself how much I love this film. I think it's one of these films that you watch it, you will either fall in love with it instantly or just not understand what the fascination is, but me fell deeply, deeply in love. So we've reached the number one. My number one choice for my top 10 truly entertaining bad movies is Showgirls. I saw this first time, I believe it was late night, Channel 4. I remember when it had come out, it'd been hyped up so much. And when I watched it, I was really confused. Again, this movie was directed by one of my favourite all-time directors, Paul Verhoeven. And I was confused because I realised how terrible it was, but I loved it. And I was fairly young when I saw it, so I really didn't understand the idea of loving something that was really terrible. And I was basically ashamed that I loved this film in secret. And I'd recorded it off the TV and I would quietly watch it, never telling anyone that I would frequently watch this movie. And it wasn't until I was older and the internet became bigger and appreciation for bad movies became more known that did I come to realise other people loved this movie too, despite it being terrible. Elizabeth Berkley signed onto this movie fresh off the back of Saved by the Bell, hoping to shirk being typecast as a role of Jessie on the iconic 90s show. And by all means, I'd say she succeeded. There is a lot to love about this movie. Gina Gershon is a pleasure every second she's on screen. The film is so quotable, but I actually can't do any of my favourite quotes, as they involve far too many swears and rude words. Showgirls is the tale of No Me Malone. No me, I'm alone. Get it? A young woman who dreams of being a dancer on a big Vegas stage. However, on arrival to Las Vegas, she loses all of her things thanks to a con man and ends up moving into a caravan with a woman who prevents her from getting run over and begins dancing as a stripper. This begins her adventure into the seedy underworld of Vegas dancers. Nomi is a complex character. She is perfectly willing to do what came down to live on-stage lesbian sex, sleeping with her boss to get an audition, and pushing the lead dancer downstairs to get a job, but she won't use ice cubes on her nipples to make them perky. No, you have to draw the line somewhere. I would honestly love to sit down one day with Paul Verhoeven and ask him why Nomi's face makeup gets more and more clown-like as the movie progresses, and specifically why towards the end of the movie, her nipples look like they've been painted on with lipstick. This has always confused me. The stars of Showgirls ultimately moved on from the movie and got on with their lives. Elizabeth Berkley, her career took a big dive. She was given a small role in The First Wives Club, but it really wasn't until many years later did she encounter something of a revival, but she did consistently work. It's just she was never given sort of the big roles that she probably deserved. She didn't write the script, and to be honest, she probably did what she could with the material because they weren't allowed to ad-lib a single line, and the material is awful. You might retroactively recognise Lynn Tucci, who is currently in Orange is the New Black as Henry, the foul-mouthed joke teller of the strip club. Cal McLaughlin continued to be awesome because he's a fantastic actor and he has a magnificent chin. Rena Riffle, who played the part of Penny, recently made her own sequel to Showgirls called Showgirls 2 Pennies from Heaven, which, if you're a huge Showgirls fan, want to see the cast reunite, you should definitely check the movie out. She manages to get back most of the actors, barring like Elizabeth Berkley and Cal McLaughlin. She gets a hell of a lot of the cast back, so she really did a great job. And considering she never directed anything before, hats off to her. It was a great movie. So that was my top 10 truly entertaining bad movies. If you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to this video and the channel. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter at Airtime Geek or Instagram at Airtime of the Geek. You can email me, Paula B, at ignitionradio.co.uk, or you can call into the studio. The number's 01642 645 827. You can also take a look at geeky art I upload to DeviantArt, and you can look me up on there. My name is Airtime Geek. Here at Airtime of the Geek, you may have noticed I'm a bit of a geek. And because I am an actual geek, I hate The Big Bang Theory. As a lifelong comic book reader, it only exacerbates the stereotypes that comic books are for men. My local Forbidden Planet is a place that I hate going because of how badly I've been treated by the staff. Whenever I dared to ask for help in finding something on their frankly poorly organised display, "Oh, you're a girl. The Twilight stuff's over there. What's that? You want Quantum and Woody collected? Why didn't you buy the original issues in print? Oh, you want them digitally? Well, you should try Amazon." This is not the attitude of every comic shop. This is specifically the Forbidden Planet in Middlesbrough Town Centre. They're terrible. They really are. They once looked down on me when I asked for a comic, that they were like, "Well, why couldn't you find it?" And it turned out that it was absolutely nowhere near the comics, and it was why the action figures. That's possibly why I couldn't find it, guys. I don't believe they've ever shown on The Big Bang Theory a female comic reader at the comic shop. I mean, you can please write in, correct me if I am wrong on this. I'm willing to say that I'm wrong, but the whole time think the show's been running, I don't think there's ever been a lady just there browsing through the comics. And the thing that really hacks me off about this is that superheroes were invented by women, for women. The Scarlet Pimpernel is acknowledged to be the first superhero in literature, and he was written by Emma Orczy for a woman's magazine. Girls like comic book stuff just as much as boys, but it's always marketed towards the boys. My eldest nephew loves that I know all about the superheroes and can tell him everything he ever asks. But his neighbour once came to me one day and said, we're talking about 4-year-olds, but he came up to me and said, "Why are you wearing boys' clothes?" I said, "They're not boys' clothes. They're my clothes. I bought them. I'm a girl. They're my clothes." The Big Bang Theory could have been a platform to establish the mainstream idea of girls can just be geeky as boys. The show took a step in the right direction with the female optical physicist Leslie, played by Roseanne alum Sarah Gilbert. She brought a refreshing take on the female geek, but after 4 episodes, the writers claimed they didn't know how to write for her, so she was dropped. Ultimately, we're talking about a show that hates nerds. Their main comedic strategy for the past however many years it's been running now is to go, "Look at the geeks. They're passionate about things. They find entertaining. Let us mock them for it." Claiming that you can loot your allies' corpses in World of Warcraft is just unforgivable. If you're going to satirise geek culture, do it right. The British sitcom The IT Crowd, which follows a pair of tech support blogs and is available on streaming services Netflix, Community, which treats its cultural references with respect while still making them funny, and of course, the ultimate nerdy comedy, Futurama, as it deftly incorporates tons of real science into its storylines. South Park's Make Love Not Warcraft episode is one of the best in which they made in conjunction with Blizzard. They made Warcraft the framework around their jokes. Community's D&D episode did the same. Are they both making fun of a lot of elements in these things? Undeniably. Absolutely, undeniably. But that's just it. They're taking the mick out of parts of it. Like the guy who gets way into roleplay getting killed by a bad dice roll. The neckbeard that plays World of Warcraft 20 hours a day. In The Big Bang Theory, nerd culture itself is the joke. I remember one episode where Sheldon said he was playing an N64 on an emulator, and then the audience laughed. I was expecting that to be the setup to the joke, but it wasn't. That's the joke. The idea that someone would want to play an N64 game on a computer was the punchline. Or the episode that Penny got really into online gaming way too much, and the guys judged her, not on the fact that she'd gotten really passionate into one of their things and actually was really good at it, but she was spending no more time preening herself and making herself look pretty. Therefore, it had to cease immediately. As someone on Reddit said, it's a show about nerds. It's not for nerds. Everything in the show is really popular stuff from nerd culture that anyone, even someone who isn't a part of it, knows about it at least. And I think the best example someone gave was this. A typical nerd joke or observation. It's as cold as Hoth. A typical Big Bang Theory joke. Wow, it's as cold as the ice planet Hoth from Star Wars. Sheldon has stated multiple times he hates Babylon 5. Never why. Trust me, if a nerd doesn't like something, they will let you know. Sometimes there will be diagrams. Sometimes there'll be a radio show. It's mean-spirited towards geeks in a way that other shows like Frasier never was. People online tend to say that geeks should get over their hate of Big Bang, but here's why it's so difficult. Most of us who grew up geek, Trekkies, gamers, card floppers, suffered relentless bullying from our peers because of our non-mainstream tastes, and Big Bang isn't taking us along for the ride. It's bullying us in our own living rooms, and if you've never been on the receiving end, then you have no idea how the rest of us feel when we're being relentlessly mocked in this fashion. In a roundabout there, this also sort of brings me to something which I hear non-geeks quote a lot, and it came up as a topic in my D&D group the other week, and it sent my eye twitching. It wasn't an argument, it's something that it really annoys me. In the movie Kill Bill 2, Bill makes a fairly eloquent speech about the difference between Superman and Clark Kent, surmising that Clark Kent is Superman's commentary on the world and the human race. It's a great speech, and would honestly be better if it wasn't total rubbish. It would be an absolutely perfect analogy if Bill had been talking about Martian Manhunter. John Jones is a Martian who came to Earth as a grown man and pretends to be a human. Clark Kent was a baby when he came to Earth. He was raised as Clark Kent, only discovering the truth of his Kryptonian heritage at a much later age. Clark is slightly dorky, if adorable, small-town farm boy. The Superman costume gives him a window into the confidence that's already inside of him. And think of yourself, when you wear certain clothes, do you feel different? If you've been following my Instagram or you know me in real life, I have a huge collection of geek shirts, and mainly they're superhero based. And when I'm wearing a superhero t-shirt, I feel more confident, I feel more powerful. I even wear certain superhero shirts when I need certain boosts in my life. On days I need self-esteem, I'll pick out an Iron Man shirt. If I need to be brave, I'll wear Captain America. If I need to stand up for myself, I'll pick out Hulk. So I feel I've got their back. Like, it's not all the times I wear these shirts that I'm like, oh, I need a boost, but I feel different wearing these to say my uniform for my other job. Clark Kent has these superpowers inside him all the time, but he puts on the costume to become Superman in persona. In fact, there are many superheroes which fit Bill's idea much more than Superman. For example, Batman. Batman is the perfect example. Bruce Wayne, I would say, in the most incarnations, is the persona, which Batman uses during the day. During the day, Bruce Wayne hangs out with supermodels and socialites, but barely develops any relationships with them. They're camouflaged, they're arm candy. whereas Batman develops very close personal relationships with Catwoman and Talia al Ghul. Batman refers to himself as Batman inside his own head, rather than Bruce. Bruce Wayne is actually the costume, not Batman. If you really actually want to read a great Batman comic, by the way, read Batman the Widening Gyre, or Gaia. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's spelled Gyre. And it was written by Kevin Smith of Jay and Silent Bob fame. And when you've read it, get on social media and around Kevin Smith to write the second part of it, because it's been 7 years and I want to find out what the hell happens. Well, that's it this week for Airtime of the Geek. Tune in next week for more Top 10s news and reviews. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter at AirtimeGeek. You can follow me on Instagram at AirtimeOfTheGeek. You can email me, paulaB@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can call in the studio. The number's 01642 645 827. You can also check me out on DeviantArt, and my username is AirtimeGeek. So thanks very much for listening today, guys.